All right, the next set we're going to do is the path of sin. So this one starts in Genesis 3. Here we're going to notice some words. So this is Adam and Eve. God's created the garden. The world is good. He's put Adam and Eve into the garden, into his paradise garden. And the serpent comes and has a conversation with Eve. And God has put Adam and Eve in a test that he's given them one command. Like he's given them multiple commands already. He said, you're going to rule the world. And so to rule the world, you need wisdom. But God said, there's a tree that gives you wisdom and I don't want you touching that. Like, don't eat from it. You got to trust me for wisdom. And the test is, are they going to trust God to give them wisdom on their own, like in his time, or are they going to take wisdom for their own? So the woman saw the tree. So that's the first action word. We're going to notice action words. The woman saw the tree, saw that the tree was good for food and that it was a delight to the eyes and that the tree was to be desired. So that's the next act. She desired it. She saw it. She desired it. She took it and she ate it. So this path, this road, starting with see, to desire, to take, and to eat. I'm going to say self-gratification, self-pleasure, going to consume something for your own good. That pattern happens over and over and over in the Bible, right? This is a little different than like a concept, and it's a little different than just a straight up like word connection. We're kind of in the word connection realm, but there's this like step pattern. So this kind of happens in the very next chapter with Cain. So Cain, Adam and Eve have two sons, Cain and Abel. Cain and Abel both make sacrifices to God. We're not told why, but for some reason God is pleased by Abel's sacrifice and isn't pleased by Cain's. And Cain is angry and upset. He thinks he should have been blessed by a sacrifice, but he isn't. And God says to him, why are you angry and why has your face fallen? If you do well, will there not be a lifting up for you? In other words, like Cain hasn't messed up yet. God's saying, just wait and trust me. And when it's appropriate, I'll lift you up as well. I exalted your brother and you'll get an exalting too. But if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. So now sin is we have this character that we're not told exactly what it is, but it sounds like maybe it's a lion or a tiger or a bear or something that wants to eat us. And we're not told that it sees us, but clearly it does. Its desire is toward you. That's all we get to connect us back to the previous story. Its desire is toward you, but you must rule over it. But clearly something sees us, or something sees Cain, something desires Cain, and something wants to consume Cain, right? And that something is called sin. And God says, you can't let it do that. So this story connects with the previous story about Eve. And we're supposed to read these stories in connection. But then it goes on. Now we're at like the story of Joseph. And so Joseph has been sold by his brothers and he's been made a slave in an Egyptian household. And here, Joseph is handsome in form and appearance. He is worth seeing and noticing. Okay, after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph. She saw him, and clearly she desired him because she says, lie with me. Now, let's notice right at the top here, we have a man and a woman in a place of leadership and royalty and privilege. This is very similar to the Garden of Eden. And he refuses and says to his master's wife, behold, my master has put everything he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you. So there's one thing that Joseph has been forbidden. Just like in the Garden of Eden, there was one thing they were forbidden. Because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? So Joseph is seeing this clearly as sin. But as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or be with her. But one day when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house were there, she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. But he left the garment in his hand and fled and got out of the house. Now let's just notice some similarities in these stories. There's a man who is blessed and placed in charge under his master. Just like Adam was blessed and placed in charge under God to rule over the world, Joseph has been blessed and placed in charge under Potiphar. There's a man and a woman together alone in a palace garden place. Anytime there's a man and a woman alone together in a place of life, you should be thinking about a connection back to Eden. Jesus and the woman at the well. You know, there's lots of those. The woman saw something good to see, but forbidden to her. She desired it, and she attempted to take it for her own pleasure. The exact same pattern as Eve. There's nakedness as a result of rebellion. It's interesting that Joseph is the one who rebels against Potiphar's wife, and he's the one who ends up naked. There are accusations flung around. Later in the story, the woman accuses Joseph of trying to rape her. And just, in the garden after the fall, Adam accuses Eve. Eve accuses the serpent. And there's judgment. In this case, Joseph gets the judgment. And the man is cast out and down in both stories. Now, there are some differences in the stories, too. We want to ask and dig. So we've noticed that there's some connections in these stories. So now we want to take the next step and kind of ask and dig deeper. So who is like Eve in the story of Joseph and Potiphar's wife? Who plays the Eve slot? Potiphar's wife? Is she the only one who plays the Eve slot? Maybe Joseph plays the Eve slot too? He's tempted. There's something forbidden him. Potiphar's wife is forbidden to him, right? But he doesn't follow through the same way Eve did. There's not always like a direct one-to-one comparison in these stories. Who is the serpent in this story? Is there a serpent in this story? Potiphar's wife seems to play the serpent to Joseph, right? She's tempting him in a similar way that the serpent was tempting Eve to do what was forbidden, right? So Potiphar's wife kind of plays Eve and kind of plays the serpent. So who is she supposed to be? Who or what is the fruit? Well, it kind of depends on your perspective, right? Who's the fruit? Joseph is the fruit for Potiphar's wife. Who's the fruit for Joseph? Potiphar's wife is the fruit for Joseph. So there's like multiple levels of things going on here, right? The man is now righteous in this one. The man wasn't righteous in the first story, but here the man is righteous and not complicit. But he still takes the punishment for the woman in this story. Well, that's interesting. We're just going to tuck that away for later. Now there's another story that we see the same sin pattern of see, desire, take, and consume for self-pleasure. And it's the story of David and Bathsheba. And you guys know this story. We don't need to read it all, but let's notice some details. David is, he's got his couch and he's walking on the roof of his palace. So there's a palace thing. If you don't know, in the ancient world, there were often gardens on top of palace roofs. Like that's where you'd put lots of your plants and your back porch, right? And he sees a woman bathing who's beautiful. So now we've already got a man and a woman in a palace place, and there's nakedness involved. Ding, 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 ding. Our sensor should be going off here. And he sees something beautiful, and he finds out she's the wife of Uriah the Hittite. So automatically we know she is forbidden. He is not allowed to go near here. So she's the forbidden fruit. So David sends messages, and he takes her, and he lays with her. Now we're connecting back to Eden, and we're also connecting to Joseph and Potiphar's wife, except here, like, David is playing the role of Potiphar's wife, the person in power who's trying to take advantage of the person not in power, right? So let's notice similarities again. There's a man who's blessed and placed in charge under God, just like the Joseph story and just like the Eden story. The man and the woman are together alone in a palace garden. We talked about that. The man, this time it's the man who sees something good, not the woman. The man sees something good to see, but forbidden to him, and he desires it and takes it for his own pleasure. So just in case you were thinking from the Eden story and from Joseph and Potiphar's wife's story that it's the woman who sins all the time, let me tell you the story about a man, all right? There's nakedness involved. It results in death. In this case, there's multiple deaths. Uriah dies, and the child conceived out of this dies. There's judgment by God. So we're going to ask and dig, like, who was like Eve in this story? In the David Bathsheba story. Who's Eve? David. It seems like David plays the Eve card. Why? Because he's the one who sees, desires, takes, and consumes, right? Where's the serpent in this story? This one's tricky. I'm not sure there's a clear answer on this, but we can throw out several possibilities. So let's just brainstorm. Who's the serpent? The rooftop. Yeah. The culture, maybe. Yeah. What? Who else? Who's the serpent?
David.
Why?
He's convincing himself it's okay.
Ooh, I like that. That's pretty rich. Okay, maybe David is the serpent. Yeah. Who or what is the fruit? Bathsheba pretty clearly is in the fruit role here, although there's a hint that maybe she's complicit in this thing. Let's don't completely rule it out. There is a righteous man in this story, but it's not David. It's Uriah the Hittite. But guess what? The righteous man doesn't eat and drink. If you read the story later, David calls Uriah back from the battlefield and says, hey, go enjoy your wife for a night, and then you can go back to the battlefield. And does Uriah do it? No, because he says, man, all my buddies are out on the battlefield. It would not be an honorable thing for me to do. So he doesn't eat and drink the forbidden fruit, even though he could. Isn't that interesting? The righteous man suffers death as a result of the guilty man. So these are all this pattern we should kind of store away. Hey, there's several stories here where a righteous man suffers in the place of the guilty party. Maybe we're going to see that pattern play out in the future. All right, now this one, I'll tell you how I found this one. I was reading Isaiah, and I was on stepbible.org, and I just happened to click on, where is it? I clicked on that word, desire. And I said, it shows up. It's not a very common word. It doesn't show up very many times in the Old Testament. It's kind of rare. We've looked at a couple places where it already shows up. So then that got me thinking, how is this connected? I couldn't see it for a while. And we'll read it and we'll see if we can see how it's connected. Who has believed what he has heard from us? And to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? The arm of the Lord, if you took my Seeing Jesus in the Old Testament class last year, the arm of the Lord is a name for Jesus in the Old Testament. The arm of the Lord is the military commander of the Lord's army, who we know in a lot of stories is Jesus. So this is looking forward to a Messiah. Who has Messiah been revealed to? Who has seen Messiah? He grew up before him like a young plant and like a root out of dry ground, kind of like a tree. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, and no beauty that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by man, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. All right. Can we find, remember, we're talking about that pattern, see, desire, take, and consume. You see that here? Where is see? That we should look at. Do we? Like, had no form or majesty that we should look at him. Do we look at him? What is he saying? We don't. So now the pattern's, like, at least this first part, it's been reversed. We don't see him. All right. What about see, desire? We already looked at desire. No beauty that we should desire him. Do we desire him? No, we don't. Now, in all the other stories, you see, desire, take, and consume something. And in this story, so far, we got see and desire that are like we don't see and we don't desire. What about take? This is a little harder. Rejected, exactly. That's the opposite of take. You either take something or you reject it. It's the opposite. We don't take. And now consume isn't really in here. But as you keep reading the story, you see that we considered this person to be not worth even living anymore, and we kill him. Which is kind of the opposite of consuming for self-gratification, right? So Isaiah is saying, he completely flips the script. He tells us the Messiah is the tree and the fruit that we should see. Like, remember what Eve back in the garden? It was the tree and the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil that she wasn't supposed to touch. What was the tree she was allowed to eat from? The tree of life. So Isaiah is saying Messiah is the tree that we should see and desire and take, but we don't. What tree did Isaiah just call the Messiah? The tree of life. By doing this move, by saying the Messiah is the one who is the tree, remember, like he says, like a young plant and a root out of dry ground, we should be thinking tree. By saying he's the one that we don't see and don't take and don't eat and consume, when we go back to the Eve story, there were two trees, and she saw and ate and took and consumed one and not the other. And the one she didn't take was the tree of life. So when Isaiah does this whole like beautiful poem thing, he's telling us the Messiah is the tree of life. And we just did the tree of life thing like in the previous example, right? And so Messiah, the righteous one, suffers in our place because it says the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. So just like Joseph, the righteous one, suffered in the place of Potiphar, Potiphar's wife is the one who should have been gotten in trouble. And just like Uriah suffered in the place of David, David was the one who should have been punished, but Uriah was the one who died. Isaiah says the Messiah will suffer in our place, which means we've been indicted. Isaiah indicts us. Because if we didn't eat from this tree, what tree did we eat from? We ate from the wrong tree. He doesn't tell us that, but that's implied in the text. So that may be all we do. How are we on time? Yeah, I tell you what, let's do one more for fun. I've got a couple other practice sets. We're not going to do these tonight, but they're in the notes. I'd encourage you, if this takes lots of practice, and so having some passages that someone else tells you are connected helps, because then you can go and try to find the connections yourself. So take my notes, try to go through those other practice sets and see how they're connected. But let's go back. We got to go way back here. We got just a few minutes. We'll go back and do one more.